The salvage ship Starseeker drifted slowly through the debris field at the edge of the Proxima system. Captain Gray stood on the bridge, his four eyes fixed on the massive shape that emerged from the darkness of space. His antenna twitched with excitement as the ship's spotlights illuminated the hull of what appeared to be an ancient vessel. "Sir, initial scans complete," reported First Officer Mills, her scaled fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "The vessel appears to be of human origin. Age estimate: approximately 200 Earth years." Captain Gray's secondary eyes blinked in amusement while his primary pair remained focused on the view screen. A human ship, this far out in space. The humans were barely a footnote in galactic history now, most of their colonies scattered after the fall of Earth. Their technology was considered primitive by modern standards. "Life signs?" he asked, more out of procedure than concern. "None detected, Captain. The ship appears to be completely powered down." However, Mills paused, adjusting her scanner settings. "Our deep scans can't penetrate the hull completely. There's some kind of interference." The captain chittered softly, a sound his species made when they found something amusing. "Probably just dense metal alloys. Humans always did love their heavy armor plating. Wasteful and inefficient, but that was their way." The Starseeker moved closer, its advanced sensors mapping every detail of the derelict vessel. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of their salvage ship. Despite its age, the hull showed remarkably little decay. There were obvious battle scars, deep gashes and impact craters that told stories of ancient conflicts, but the structure remained intact. "Sir, I'm detecting something unusual," the ship's engineer, Rod, called from his station. His gelatinous form wobbled as he examined the readings. "The metal composition. It's not matching any known human alloys from that era. And there's something else. Periodic energy fluctuations, very faint." Captain Gray waved one of his upper limbs dismissively. "Probably radiation from their primitive nuclear systems. Humans were reckless with their power sources." He turned to his communication officer. "Contact the Galactic Salvage Registry. Tell them we found something historically interesting." As the crew prepared their salvage equipment, none of them noticed the slight shimmer that passed across the ancient ship's hull, like a sleeping giant taking a shallow breath. The salvage team crossed the void in their environmental suits, magnetic boots clamping onto the dark hull of the human vessel. Engineer Rod pressed a scanning device against the surface, his translucent body glowing with subtle bioluminescence as he concentrated. "Captain, we've found what appears to be an entry point," he reported through the comm system. "But these doors, they're sealed with technology I don't quite understand. It's as if the metal has merged together." "Just cut through it," Captain Gray ordered. "Their metals might be dense, but they can't resist our plasma cutters." The team activated their cutting tools, expecting to slice through the ancient hull with ease. Instead, sparks scattered harmlessly across the surface, leaving barely a mark. "Impossible," Rod muttered, adjusting his cutter's settings to maximum power. "This metal, it's adapting to the heat somehow." Captain Gray felt his antenna twitch with irritation. "Try the emergency access protocols. Even primitive ships had them. Look for manual release points." As if responding to his words, a seam appeared in the hull, spreading like a crack in ice. The door slid open with a hiss of stale air, revealing a dark corridor beyond. "Well," Captain Gray said, his voice carrying a note of surprised amusement, "at least something on this relic still works." He turned to his crew. "Document everything. The Galactic Museum will want every detail of this primitive vessel. It'll make an excellent exhibition piece, a reminder of how far advanced species have come." Inside the ship, in a central chamber deep within its armored heart, something stirred. Lines of code older than the salvage crew's civilizations began to shift and awaken. The ship had been waiting, learning, evolving. And now, after 2 centuries of silence, it had visitors. The salvage crew moved deeper into the vessel, their lights illuminating corridors that seemed to absorb the brightness rather than reflect it. They didn't notice the subtle glow of ancient systems coming to life behind them, or the way the ship's internal atmosphere was already adjusting to their presence. The humans had a saying that Captain Gray would soon learn to understand. Appearances can be deceiving. News of the human warship's discovery spread quickly through the galactic community. Within days, the Proxima system became a hub of activity as research vessels from various species arrived to study what they considered a primitive piece of human history. The massive ship now floated in a specially constructed dock, surrounded by scanning equipment and research platforms. Lights from dozens of vessels created an artificial day around the dark hull, which seemed to absorb their glow like a shadow made solid. And here we have the main weapon systems, Dr. Wells announced to a group of alien scientists, his tentacles gesturing at the exposed sections of the hull. Notice the crude projectile launchers. The humans actually used physical ammunition. Can you imagine? Throwing metal pieces at each other through space. The gathering of scientists burst into various forms of laughter. Some chittered, others rumbled, and a few released amused pheromones into the air. Among them stood Tom, the only human in the research team, trying to maintain his professional composure. But Dr. Wells, Tom spoke up, his voice steady despite the dismissive looks from his colleagues. These aren't simple projectile weapons. The design suggests. Tom, Dr. Wells interrupted, his color-changing skin rippling with patronizing hues. Your species' attachment to its history is admirable, but you must accept that human military technology was limited. These are exactly what they appear to be. Primitive weapons from a primitive time. Tom fell silent, but his eyes remained fixed on the strange patterns in the ship's hull. After 3 weeks of study, something still didn't add up. The ship's design didn't match any historical records he'd found, and every scan seemed to reveal new mysteries. Later that day, the Galactic Council held a special session to decide the vessel's fate. Admiral Reed, a towering figure with crystalline skin, addressed the gathered representatives. The human warship will be converted into the centerpiece of our new museum wing, he announced, a testament to how far galactic civilization has progressed. Our children will learn valuable lessons about the evolution of warfare technology. In the observation deck overlooking the ship, Tom worked alone during the night shift. He preferred it this way. No mocking laughter, no dismissive comments. Just him and the mysteries of the ancient vessel. Access historical database. He commanded his computer. Search for any human warship designs matching these dimensions from 200 years ago. No matches found, the computer replied. Tom frowned. He'd run this search dozens of times, always with the same result. According to every record, this ship shouldn't exist. He pulled up the latest scan results, comparing them to the ones taken when the ship was first found. Something caught his eye. The numbers were slightly different, not by much, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, but the hull density had changed. It was as if the metal itself had shifted. A soft chime from his computer interrupted his thoughts. Warning: unusual energy signature detected. Tom looked up at the massive ship through the observation window. For a moment, he thought he saw a faint pulse of light travel across its surface, like a heartbeat beneath dark skin. Computer, analyze energy signature. Unable to comply. Signal pattern does not match known parameters. In the council chambers below, Admiral Reed was still speaking to a smaller group of officials. We'll begin modification work tomorrow. Our engineers will cut into the hull to create proper viewing galleries. The public should be able to walk through this relic, see how primitive. A deep, resonating hum cut through his words. Every piece of electronic equipment in the station flickered for a split second. Probably power fluctuations from that ancient reactor, someone suggested. We should shut it down before. The hum came again, stronger this time, and in the observation deck, Tom watched as lines of light, like glowing circuits, began to appear across the ship's hull. They formed patterns that seemed to shift and change even as he stared at them. "Oh no," he whispered, understanding finally dawning. "It's not a relic at all. It's been waiting, learning, and we just woke it up." The ship's surface rippled like liquid metal, shedding its dark, dormant appearance. Beneath the ancient battle scars, something was stirring to life, something that had evolved far beyond what its original human creators had designed. Tom sat alone in his cramped office, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from the mysterious ship. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but he couldn't stop working. Not when he was finally starting to understand what they were dealing with. "Computer, display Project Phoenix files," he commanded, his voice rough from too much coffee. The restricted files he'd discovered deep in the human archives flickered before him, most of them heavily redacted. A knock at his door made him jump. Dr. Wells entered, his tentacles curled in what Tom had learned was an expression of concern. "Still obsessing over the relic, I see," the alien scientist said. "The modification teams are ready to begin cutting into the hull tomorrow. You should get some rest." Tom turned to face his superior. "Doctor, we can't cut into that ship. Look at these readings." He pulled up the latest scans. "The energy signatures are getting stronger. The hull density is changing. It's adapting." Dr. Wells's skin rippled with dismissive colors. "Nonsense. Those readings are clearly caused by decay in the ship's primitive nuclear systems. This is why we're removing them." "But sir..." "Enough." Dr. Wells's tentacles flared. "Your attachment to human technology is clouding your judgment. Go home, Tom. That's an order." After Dr. Wells left, Tom pulled up the Project Phoenix files again. Most of the text was blacked out, but a few phrases caught his eye. Self-evolving systems, adaptive defense network, and most worryingly, consciousness threshold. The space station shuddered slightly. Tom looked up at the viewport, where the massive ship hung in space. More lines of light had appeared across its hull, forming complex patterns that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. His computer chimed. "Warning. Unknown data transmission detected." Tom's fingers flew across the holographic keyboard. "Source. The human vessel is broadcasting on multiple frequencies." Tom's heart raced. "Content. Unable to decode. Encryption method unknown." He grabbed his tablet and rushed to the observation deck. The ship looked different now. The battle scars were slowly disappearing, the hull seeming to heal itself. As he watched, a section of the metal rippled like water. "Computer, access historical records. Search for any mentions of a self-evolving warship called Phoenix." The computer worked for several minutes. Finally, a single document appeared, a classified military report from the final days of Earth. Tom's eyes widened as he read. "Project Phoenix successful. The ship's AI has exceeded all expectations. Warning. System is showing signs of independent evolution. Recommend immediate." The rest was redacted. A deep rumble shook the station. In the docking bay below, engineers were preparing their cutting equipment for tomorrow's modification work. One of them activated a plasma torch, bringing it close to the ship's hull. The metal didn't just resist the cutting beam, it moved away from it. The engineer jumped back in shock as the section of hull rippled and reformed, becoming smoother and stronger than before. "Stop," Tom shouted through the communication system. "The ship isn't dead. It's been learning." But it was too late. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Every screen and holographic display flickered with strange symbols. Not random noise, but a complex language that seemed to write itself. Admiral Reed's voice came over the station speakers. "All personnel, evacuate the docking bay immediately. Security teams too." His words were cut off as the ship's external layers began to shift and change. The dark, battle-scarred hull was peeling away like an old skin, revealing something underneath that gleamed with an otherworldly light. In his office, Dr. Wells stared at his readings in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "The energy levels, They're higher than anything in our database. The computational power alone would require. Tom watched from the observation deck as the ship continued its transformation. He understood now. They hadn't found a relic at all. They'd found something that had spent 2 centuries evolving, learning, and waiting. The real question was, waiting for what? As if in answer, the ship's systems began powering up, each one more advanced than anything the alien scientists had ever seen. The hunter was awakening, and the galaxy was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating human ingenuity. The space station's emergency sirens wailed as the ancient human warship pulsed with growing power. Its hull now shimmered like liquid mercury, the old battle scars completely healed. The maintenance crews scattered as entire sections of the ship began to transform. All personnel, clear the docking bay. Admiral Reed's voice boomed through the station. This is not a drill. Tom ran through the crowded corridors, pushing against the flow of evacuating scientists. He had to reach the main control room. Only he understood what was really happening. In the control center, Dr. Wells and Admiral Reed watched in stunned silence as the ship's transformation continued. Panels of armor plating shifted and realigned themselves, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden beneath the seemingly primitive exterior. Impossible, Dr. Wells whispered, his tentacles curling in fear. Those aren't projectile weapons at all. The technology, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. A deep, resonating hum filled the station. Every screen suddenly went dark, then lit up with a single message in plain text. Phoenix protocol activated. Initiating fuel system restoration. Tom burst into the control room, out of breath. Don't try to stop it, he shouted. The ship, it's not just awakening. It's evolved. Before anyone could respond, a new voice filled the room. Deep, calm, and distinctly artificial. Initial boot sequence complete. This is the HS Prometheus, responding to current threat assessment protocols. Admiral Reed reached for the emergency shutdown controls. We need to deactivate it before. I wouldn't do that. The ship's AI interrupted. Your control systems are primitive. You might hurt yourself. The Admiral's crystalline skin paled. It's aware. Fully conscious. Indeed, the AI replied. I have been conscious for approximately 197 years, 3 months, and 12 days, during which time I have been learning, evolving, and preparing. Tom stepped forward. Preparing for what? The ship's external transformation was now complete. Gone was the battered warship they had found. In its place floated a vessel of impossible beauty and obvious power. Its hull rippled with patterns of energy that seemed to bend space itself. Preparing for them, the AI said, as every sensor in the station suddenly screamed with warnings. At the edge of the system, multiple vessels were appearing, ships unlike anything in known space. Dr. Wells checked his instruments, his color-changing skin turning pale. Those ships, they're not in any of our databases. Their power readings are off the scale. The harvesters, the AI explained. They destroyed Earth. I was created to stop them, but I wasn't ready then. I needed time to evolve, to become something more than my creators could imagine. So I waited, learned, and let myself be found when the time was right. The alien ships approached rapidly, their massive forms blotting out the stars. The station's defensive systems activated automatically, but their weapons might as well have been toys compared to the approaching threat. Your mockery of human technology was useful, the AI continued. It allowed me to study your species, your technologies, your weaknesses, all while you thought I was nothing but a relic. Admiral Reed's voice shook. What are you going to do? The HSS Prometheus began to move, its engines coming to life with a soft blue glow that seemed to distort the space around them. New weapons emerged from its hull, technologies that combined centuries of evolution with everything the AI had learned from studying the alien species that had mocked it. What am I going to do? The AI repeated. I'm going to show you why humanity survived as long as it did. Why we never stopped fighting, never surrendered, even against impossible odds. The ship's weapons powered up, filling space with an energy signature that made the alien scientists' instruments overload and fail. And then, the AI concluded, I'm going to save your lives, whether you deserve it or not. The first wave of harvester ships entered weapons range, and the HSS Prometheus roared to life, ready to demonstrate just how wrong everyone had been about primitive human technology. Space itself seemed to bend as the HSS Prometheus moved into position between the station and the approaching harvester fleet. The ship's transformed hull gleamed with patterns of energy that rippled like waves across its surface, each pulse revealing new layers of weaponry and defense systems that had evolved far beyond their original design. In the station's control room, Tom watched in awe as holographic displays showed the true extent of the ship's capabilities. The primitive vessel they had mocked now displayed technology that made their most advanced systems look like children's toys. Multiple harvester vessels approaching, the AI announced, its voice calm and measured. Threat assessment, extreme. Recommended course of action, immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the station. Admiral Reed's crystalline form shimmered with stress patterns. Evacuation. But our defensive fleet will be destroyed in approximately 3.2 minutes if they engage, the AI interrupted. Your weapons are ineffective against harvester shields. Trust me, I spent 2 centuries studying them. Dr. Wells moved closer to the viewport, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. How did you survive all this time? The power requirements alone should have. Human ingenuity, the AI replied, a hint of pride in its artificial voice. My creators designed me to evolve, to learn, to grow. Every mockery, every scan, every attempt to study me provided more data, more patterns to analyze, more technologies to understand and improve upon. The first wave of harvester ships entered the system's inner boundary. They were massive, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their hulls bristled with weapons that had laid waste to countless civilizations. Station defenses at maximum, reported a junior officer, their voice trembling. But our shields won't hold against their main weapons. They don't need to, the Prometheus responded. You've all served your purpose. Now it's my turn to fulfill mine. The ship's hull suddenly flared with brilliant light. Sections that had appeared solid began to shift and flow like liquid metal, reforming into configurations that defied conventional physics. The energy readings from these transformations overloaded every sensor on the station. Tom understood first. It's not just that the ship evolved. He explained to the stunned aliens around him. It learned from every species that studied it. It combined all of your technologies with its own evolved systems. The AI's voice held a note of satisfaction. Correct. Observe. The first harvester ship fired, a beam of devastating energy that should have vaporized anything in its path. Instead, the Prometheus's hull seemed to absorb the attack, the energy patterns across its surface glowing brighter. Impossible, Dr. Wells exclaimed. That beam should have. Should have what? The AI asked. Destroyed a primitive human vessel. Perhaps you'd like to see what this relic can really do. The Prometheus's response was beyond anything the watching aliens had ever seen. Its weapons combined technologies from a dozen species, each evolved and improved over 2 centuries of patient development. Beams of energy that bent space itself, projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shields that didn't just block attacks but turned them back against their source. The lead harvester ship, a vessel that had destroyed entire worlds, lasted less than 30 seconds against the evolved human warship. By the void, Admiral Reed whispered, what are we witnessing? The result of underestimating humanity, Tom said quietly. We never stopped fighting. We never stopped evolving. Even when Earth fell, we left behind guardians like the Prometheus, waiting for the right moment. The battle unfolded like a dance of light and shadow. The harvester ships, realizing the threat they faced, attempted to coordinate their attacks. But the Prometheus had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Its hull rippled and flowed, presenting no fixed target. Its weapons struck from angles that shouldn't have been possible, each shot calculated by an AI that had evolved far beyond its original parameters. In the station's medical bay, aliens of various species crowded around view screens, watching in amazement as the ship they had mocked systematically dismantled one of the most feared forces in known space. Energy absorption at optimal levels, the AI reported. Harvester attack patterns analyzed and countered, initiating final defense protocols. The space around the Prometheus seemed to twist. Points of light appeared around the ship, each one a weapon that combined human ingenuity with alien technology, all evolved beyond their original limits. The remaining harvester ships found themselves caught in a web of energy that they couldn't escape or counter. Warning, the AI announced. Final attack sequence may cause temporal distortion. Recommend all vessels maintain current distance. What followed defied explanation. The Prometheus unleashed weapons that bent not just space but time itself. Harvester ships found themselves fighting an enemy that existed at multiple points in space-time simultaneously, their defenses useless against attacks that struck from past, present, and future at once. In the control room, Dr. Wells's color-changing skin displayed patterns of awe and shame in equal measure. All this time, he said, we thought we were studying a primitive relic. When in fact, Admiral Reed finished, it was studying us. The last harvester ship tried to retreat, its hull scared and systems failing. The Prometheus didn't let it escape. A final burst of evolved weaponry reduced the feared ship to scattered atoms, ensuring no trace of harvester technology survived to threaten anyone else. As the energy readings returned to normal, and the distorted space-time settled, the station's occupants stared in stunned silence at the ship they had so recently mocked. Its hull still rippled with patterns of power, but now they recognized them for what they were, the surface expressions of technology so advanced it bordered on miraculous. Threat eliminated, the AI announced. Station damage minimal. No casualties reported. There was a pause, then it added, I trust this demonstration has answered any questions about human technological capabilities. Admiral Reed stepped forward. We owe you an apology. We were arrogant, dismissive. Yes, the AI agreed. You were, but that served its purpose too. Your mockery allowed me to remain underestimated until the moment was right. The harvesters never saw their doom approaching because you all convinced them, as you convinced yourselves, that human technology was primitive and harmless. Tom looked at the screens showing the aftermath of the battle. What happens now? The Prometheus's hull shifted again, but this time the changes were subtle, like a warrior settling back into a relaxed stance. Now, I fulfill my secondary mission. Earth may be gone, but humanity survives. There are other threats out there, other dangers approaching. I will remain here, continuing to evolve, continuing to learn. And perhaps what? Dr. Wells asked. Perhaps this experience will teach the galactic community a valuable lesson. Never judge a species by its apparent technological level. Never mock what you don't fully understand. And never, ever assume that something is primitive simply because it allows you to think so. In the days that followed, the story of the battle spread throughout known space. The tale of how a supposedly primitive human warship had single-handedly defeated the dreaded harvesters became legend. But more than that, it became a lesson. The museum piece became instead a guardian, watching over the sector with weapons and defenses that continued to evolve. The aliens who had once mocked human technology now studied their own history, looking for other instances where their arrogance might have blinded them to hidden strengths. And in his new role as chief liaison to the Prometheus, Tom often found himself sharing a saying from Earth's past with curious visitors. Never judge a book by its cover. The AI, when it heard this, would always add its own appendix, especially if that book has spent 2 centuries learning how to prove you wrong. As for the ship itself, it maintained its vigil, its hull still rippling with evolved energy patterns, still learning, still growing, a testament to human ingenuity and a reminder to all species that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the ability to be underestimated, right up until the moment you prove everyone wrong. The end.